Hi everyone, welcome back to part 3 of SSAE16 for NetSuite, How to Review and Map Controls. As a reminder, part 1 we discussed how to review the report to see if it's a Type I or Type II, what's an unqualified opinion. In part 2 we talked about how to review the report dates to see how long it's good for, what a bridge letter looks like, and what are user control considerations. And in this part, we will discuss what controls am I relying on, what do I do after I review the SSAE16 report.
So the next question you have is, what controls am I relying on? We've addressed the end user considerations, and now we're talking about NetSuite's controls that as a company, these are the items, the procedures that I'm relying on. I'm going to go back to the NetSuite report. And we actually go, let's look at the table of contents because that's the easiest way to find what you're looking for. And here you'll see it starting on page 39 is where NetSuite has its, you actually have to sort of scan through to read it. So we'll go to page 39. And now you will see that these are the control objectives. So NetSuite, the way I review this is because I've seen so many of these SOC 1 reports, I basically skip. I know that typically they'll talk about system development objectives and what they do. I will just scan through because what happens is they have their objectives here. This is the control that they have in place, or the objectives that they have in place, and these are the specific descriptions of the controls. And then this is what KPMG did to test and verify it, and these are the results. And so honestly, I just scan down to see, I look to see when it says no exceptions noted, that's good. I just don't even read those things. That's probably bad, but I just scan through. There are no exceptions, no exceptions, no exceptions. That's great. Seems like they operate a good environment. Now when you see some wording on this side over here where exceptions are noted, this is where, as a reviewer, you actually need to pay attention to this. And in this case, you may want to, actually not may, you will want to note these exceptions and how you would deal with it to ensure that you can still rely on this report. So in this case, let's go through, and it says that the typical control is that HR will send an employee notification when they occur to the security administrators to make sure that their logical access rights to all of the corporate systems have been disabled, but they have within a few hours, but no later than 3 business days from when they get the notice. In this case, if you read this exception, KPMG tested 40 samples, 40 terminations, and identified 1 termination that didn't happen until 16 days after the termination, which is their normal standard says it's 3 business days right here, but this is 16, so that's an exception, and KPMG noted that. Now, I will say this is fairly typical for most SAS 70s or SSAE16 reports. There are always these types of issues because even as much as you have a clean operating environment, it's hard to be 100% perfect. So in this case, usually management will have a response, so we'll go down and look at that later. I'll continue noting this, reviewing this, and now here's the next exception. It says basically that on a quarterly basis, IT will review the list of active users and make sure that anyone unauthorized or any terminated employees or users are off the system. So if you notice, this is a detective control. The first exception we had is more of prevent control. When someone leaves the company, you prevent them from coming back into the system and maybe making an error or maliciously doing something. You prevent them by locking them out. If you don't do that, and in this case, on a quarterly basis, you can also then detect maybe you forgot. In this case, they did. It was noted that 1 of the 4 quarterly reviews didn't happen. And then now we'll look at section 5 for that. But then I review the rest of the report, and it looks like it's clean. There are no exceptions noted, nothing else noted. That's pretty good. So now we're at section 5, and this is where management gets to do a response. And so management has responded through the quarterly access review, and it says that the cause of this was an oversight of the process owner during the Q2 process review. They've now discussed it. The IT director has discussed it with the process owner. IT will also implement an automated job alert to send reminders so that you don't forget this. And to be honest, if I were looking at this, I would say this response falls a little short of what I would expect, because now while I know the error occurred, I don't know the impact. Ideally, they would tell me that, oh, when we did finally do the review, we didn't find anyone who didn't have inappropriate access, or we didn't find any exceptions, or we found 2 exceptions and here are the reasons why they're not a problem for us. But this, I think this response is a little short. Now, the response below, this is where you'll see that it is actually a good response, where 1 out of 40 terminations did not happen timely. So again, they said this was an oversight by the project manager in sending the termination notification to HR. This has been discussed with the manager. It's not expected to occur again, okay? But this hasn't really gotten to the good part. This individual's access was very limited. So now they're saying, look, we know we have one person whose access we didn't terminate on time, but their access was very limited. It was only permitted on site using a NetSuite issued laptop for a particular project. When the project ended, the individual's badge and laptop were turned in. Their account, we also then checked, and their account wasn't accessed after the termination. And so management has investigated and determined that there's no significant impact. Therefore, this isn't a problem. So now this is a good response, because then you feel that, I don't have to worry. Someone might have slipped through the crack, but they didn't go back into the system again. So this is how you review. So what I'm showing you right now is when you've done the review and we notice that we have the 2 exceptions, what I've done is at the bottom of the work papers where we've mapped out the user considerations, I've now put the 2 exceptions. So we have the number, we have the type. So in this case, it was the control objective 2, logical security. NetSuite control exception was 1 of 4 quarterly access review was not performed. And then it says, what company, for us as a company, what controls do we have to ensure that this doesn't impact us and that we can still rely on this? And in this case, I'm saying there are various review controls in the procure to pay, in the order to cash, the financial close, the inventory, and the treasury cycle that would have caught this. And we also have to put the company control descriptions, but there's a response to it. How does this impact us? And we say that the company has controls in place to review its financial results regularly. This control exception did not impact the company's financial results. Therefore, this report can be relied upon. Essentially, what we're saying is even though NetSuite had this exception, we're confident that the controls we have in place, manual controls to review our financials, would have caught anything that was suspicious or impacted our financial results. The next one that you'll see is, remember I told you that they had 1 out of 40 terminations selected was not removed timely. And so here it says, what control do you have as a company to verify that this exception doesn't impact you? And essentially here I've written that based on the description of the exception, the terminated employee did not have access to the NetSuite production environment after termination. Therefore, risk of unapproved changes to the production environment are low. And that way I don't have to have a control, because I've assessed that even though they had an exception, this person didn't go back and do anything, so there is no risk. And that's essentially what you have to do whenever you find the controls that you're relying on from NetSuite, if there is an exception to it. Okay, So we've looked at the opinion, we've looked at the dates, we've looked at the user considerations, and you've looked at the controls that you're relying on from NetSuite. What do you do after you review the SSAE16 report? What's the final touch to it? So I'm actually going to show you. So what we do at the end of all of this is you have to basically document your conclusions somehow so that the auditors know that you've looked at it and that you are choosing to rely on this SSAE16. And so right here in our work papers, we actually have a conclusion box right here. And so if I were the controller doing this review, I would say I reviewed this SSAE16 report and it can be relied upon. And then you can sign and date it. So you can say controller, today's date, and year, and there you go. So now at least you have documentation, and now this is the ideal situation for your clients or for your auditors, because now they can say, I can see all the procedures that you've done, I can see that you've mapped out your user control considerations, and you've also mapped out your exceptions, and you're done. Congratulations!